Listen, today we're going to start a new series called The Power of Words. And on the way in, I hope you were handed a card like this. I mentioned it a minute ago. If not, grab one on your way out. There will be out in the lobby, in the opening there, there's a place where you can pick those up. It's got a little passage of scripture on it, and it's going to be the heart and soul of the next 3 weeks of where we're going. In fact, so much so that my hope is when you hear it enough or you read it enough, this will be something that will be so stuck in your brain that it will always haunt you all the time. Well, that's like a bad word, right? That's a bad connotation. Not haunt you, it will inspire you. There you go. For all time. And it says this: let no evil talk come out of your mouths, but only what is useful for building up as there is need, so that your words may give grace to those who hear. This is a great scripture to get into your head, to get into your heart, especially in times like this, where we live so culturally and religiously and politically divided, at least in our nation. So in his letter to a group of Christians in the church of Ephesus, the Apostle Paul, he wrote this. This was part of his letter, and it started out by saying, let no evil talk come out of your mouths. Now, I want to break down a little bit, because the original word in Greek that we've translated as evil is actually a word that he used called sapros, which is a word that's used to describe when food spoils, but especially when it spoils and rottens to the point where it will poison you when you eat it. What Paul is trying to tell this church, and I say us, is saying to not let the words that come out of your mouth make other people sick. How might that happen? And we probably know how this happens. I'm guessing you've all been someplace, but one in particular that always, I got to tell you, when I hear it, I cringe. And it takes every ounce of energy I have not to like jump in and do something. It's when a mom or a dad berates a kid, especially like at the grocery store in public. Get over here, you dummy. You know, what is wrong with you? Are you stupid or something? Man, when I hear that, I cringe. When people swear at kids, and listen, those words are like poison. And I know this because as a pastor, I have talked to people who have heard those words growing up, and how those words still play in the soundtrack of their mind over and over, 10, 20, 30 years later. They hear those words and it starts to poison a person. I've ministered to young women who have struggled with eating disorders. You sit down and you talk with them, and inevitably they'll tell you about an instance in their life where maybe their aunt or their family member or kids at school or somebody called them fat. And so because of that, they had somehow put their lives into jeopardy, trying to make sure that they never hear those words ever again. Words can be poisonous. And often, once we say them, they can never be unsaid, right? In fact, I want to do something a little bit fun as we get into this to kind of give you an illustration. In fact, to do it, I need 2 volunteers, so you need to be quick to volunteer. I'm going to have 2 people come up, or I'm going to just start picking people. So 2, really quick. Come on now. Come on up. 1, 2, raise your hand. I got Rosie, and Joe. Come on down. Rosie, I'm going to have you go right over here. Joe, I'm going to have you go right over here, and I'm going to give you a present. So growing up, my favorite toothpaste was Aquafresh because it was 3 colors. And on the commercials, when it squirted out, it was always this beautiful 3 colors. Now open it up, make sure that it is indeed in there. And now don't do anything yet, because whenever I say go, this is a race, by the way. And the winner gets adulations from those in the room, and those who are watching online are going to say, way to go. So whenever I say go, I want you to empty the entire contents of the tube onto the paper plate. Now there's different ways to do this, right? You can just kind of squeeze the whole thing out. You can roll it. You could be one of those sadistic people that squeeze it from the middle of the tube but then have to start over. However you want to do it. Are you guys ready? On your mark. Get set. Go. Okay. Rosie's got Joe has got, oh my. There you go. I think Joe got it. So Joe gets congratulations. Excellent, excellent. Thank you, thank you. Now, wait. Don't go yet, okay? Because there's a step 2. No, now, when I say go, I want you to put the toothpaste back in the tube. And the winner of this, I'll take you to lunch. No, I'm joking. You can't put it back in, can you? Thank you. Go ahead and have a seat. There you go. You could take it home with you. It'd be nice. It is a hokey demonstration. It's great with kids, but I think sometimes we as adults need to have fun little things to remind us that once said, what? Can't be unsaid. In another letter Paul wrote to another church in Colossae, located in the southern border of what today is called Turkey. He wrote this to a church. He says, "Now you must get rid of all such things, anger, wrath, malice, slander, and abusive language from your mouth." Now, I want you to catch something. Who is Paul writing to? He is writing to a church. He is writing to Christians. And why do you think he had to tell this group of Christians to be careful with what comes out of their mouth with one another? It is because, yes, their faith had not moved yet from their heads and their hearts to their mouth. It hasn't. We often talk about, surrendering our heads and our hearts, but I think often we really need to surrender our mouths to Jesus. And believe it or not, Christians have the ability to say angry, slanderous, and abusive things. In the Greek word in here, it actually translates also obscene and filthy things are being said about people in the church. And I was thinking about this and how a lot of us talk about following Jesus means surrendering your heart. I think maybe the prayer this week is, Jesus, I surrender my mouth to you, right? In our culture, we often say it really just matters where your heart is, that you got to surrender your heart to Jesus. But no, you have to surrender everything to Jesus, including your mouth. So whatever comes out of your mouth may honor him. What if every day when you brush your teeth, I'm assuming you do it, what if that became an act of surrender? What if in brushing your teeth every day, you're saying to yourself, okay, Jesus, I'm brushing stuff out of my teeth, but Jesus, I want you to brush the stuff out of my mouth. Jesus, clean me, cleanse me, make my words clean, get the filth out, get the poison out. Let my words be like minty, fresh toothpaste to everybody. Surrender your mouth. Also this, hurtful words, do damage. We've often said sticks and stones may break my bones, but words, what? Words destroy is the way it should be. But here's the thing, is hearing no words of affirmation can destroy just as much. And I'm thinking that this is probably a more common practice for many of us, that we withhold the kind of positive, life-giving words that people need to hear. Paul said, let no evil talk come out of your mouth, but then he went on to say at the end of it, but only what is useful for building up, giving grace to those who hear. And the idea is that your words need to actually nourish somebody. And I think that if you don't nourish at least one person every day, then somehow, as a Jesus follower, you have missed the mark. You need to nourish people. Also, by the way, whether they deserve it or not, they need nourishing words. But some of you grew up in homes where they weren't very nourishing, and you didn't grow up in a lot of love and grace. Not that maybe it wasn't there, but it just wasn't said. I know people who have spent their entire lives operating out of such a deficit of love that everything they do in their life is a desperate attempt to get somebody to say something nice to them, or to compliment them, or to say that they love them. And the good news is that part of the power of the Christian faith, the power of Jesus and the gospel, is that even if you did not receive that, growing up from friends or parents or siblings, there is a God that is constantly trying to tell you that I know you by name, and I made you, and you are wonderfully made, and I love you no matter what. God's words, if you let them, can actually fill you up and give you that affirmation that maybe you didn't get before. But listen, this is not just words, though, that we say to our closest people, like our wives or our kids. But I want to talk to kids, and I'm not talking about just kids, because my parents are still alive. I'm talking to myself. I'm a kid. At least I keep telling myself. Every time arthritis kicks in, I'm still a kid. Listen, your parents need to hear words of grace from you as well. Your parents do. Your parents need to hear from you. And yes, I know your parents weren't perfect, because there are no perfect parents. There's just no way to be perfect. But they need to hear words of grace and words that bless them and words that encourage them, especially as they get older. Grandparents, the same way. So are you doing that? Are you routinely doing that for your parents? Are you withholding things because you still somehow resent something that never was said, or something that should never have been said in your past? Now, assuming that you believe that words have this kind of power, I actually want to give you some words that can actually change relationships that you're in. I want to be practical for a little bit, if that's okay. They're so simple. You know them already. So for some of you, this is more about being reminded than instructed, but they are so life-giving and important. First, people need to hear that they're loved. They need to hear 3 words: I love you. And they need to hear it regularly. And I know for some of us that struggles, especially in marriages, it's like, oh, of course I love you. Well, have you said it lately? I said, all of us need to know that we are treasured, that our lives matter, that somebody thinks that we're special and that we're important to them. I said, growing up, I grew up in a family that yes, they were kind and they were loving, but we did not say words of affection to one another. And so for me growing up, it was very weird and difficult to come into contact with people that would say, I love you. And I'm like, yeah. But I didn't get that. And so growing up into my teens, that time where you kind of dismiss everything your parents ever tell you because it's just in our nature. And so I started to equate my parents with caring and unloving, even though into my 20s I realized that they were very loving and very caring, but they did it because of certain actions they did. Why did they never say it? Well, it was probably because getting to know them later is their parents never said. Nobody taught them how. And so listen, if nobody's taught you how, use this as a time to learn this. Because somewhere around my late 20s to early 30s, it dawned on me that I am never going to hear my father or my mother tell me I love them. And listen, I wasn't destroyed over it because I knew they loved me. But I never was going to hear it. But at the same time, I decided that didn't give me an excuse to not tell them. And so one day, just in a casual phone conversation about nothing in particular, I ended the phone conversation with my dad. I'm like, well, Dad, I love you. And you could hear it, like trying to process. And he said, I love you too. He kind of even said it that way. Like he couldn't believe he was saying it. And so every time they would call, I would say that. And every time I would call, I would say that. And now you know what happens when I call? Or when they call, before I get a chance to do it, they tell me they love me. And I got to tell you, just those words, I believe, were the catalyst to actually improving the bond that we had. Even though it wasn't bad, it's made us even closer by simply saying, I love you. I sang this song a little bit from Willie Nelson, which is really kind of a song that's like, hey, all those times I never said that or didn't do that. See, I played the song because in the last 6 years, I did 2 different funerals, one for a husband that died, and then last month later on for his wife, who died 6 years later. And at their service, they both wanted that song to be played. And I asked the family, I'm like, why? Don't you realize this is not a very uplifting song? This is a song saying that your loved one really didn't say the things they needed to or weren't there all the time. And they said, we know that, but they loved this song, and it actually described their personalities. And we want people to hear it and to hear you say that we can be different. Tell people you love them. Let me ask you, have you said those words to people in your family lately? Your children or your spouse or, your parents, your grandparents? Listen, they need to hear it, and they need to hear it in different ways. a text or a Facebook message or a Post-it note or a voicemail. I don't know, get creative with it. There's all different ways to tell somebody that you love them. Now, the second thing is not a word that we need to speak. In fact, I believe it's the exact opposite. So the practical thing actually comes from the Apostle James, who is the brother of Jesus. In his writing in your New Testament, it says this: let everybody be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to anger. And you may have heard this before. Never underestimate the power of listening to the words that people say. There's a movie a long time ago, Chris Tucker, I believe is his name, and Jackie Chan. I love Jackie Chan movies. And they have a speech problem between the two, and Chris Tucker looks over and he goes, "Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?" I repeat that often. By the way, now if I ever do that to you, you know where it comes from. Listen, never underestimate the power of listening to understand the words that are coming out of people's mouths. I've heard it said before, God, has given you 2 ears and 1 mouth, which should be a recipe for us to know how often we should listen versus how much we should talk. And listen, I can talk about this because I'm guilty of this. Almost daily, if I'm honest, I have to remind myself to listen to people, because one of my problems, one of my defects in life is when I listen to people, I zone out. Yeah, and I apologize if you're talking to me and I got this weird look. Chances are I have zoned out. But often, some of the times, you start to talk, and what I start to do is I hear the very beginning of it, and I know I'm the only one in the room that does this, by the way. But I am instantly not listening anymore because I've already tried to figure out how I'm going to say something back to you. And usually something back to you that is even better than the story you told me, or to show you how you're wrong in what you said. Listen, I completely miss the point of what people are saying. And we do this. We tune out our kids and our spouses, our parents. Most of the time, we do this so much to the people who are around us. And I know, because I am so guilty of this. One of the best gifts you can give them when it comes to words is looking in their eyes and setting down your phone and paying attention. Let's move on. When it comes to words, more practical stuff around having healthy relationships. Listen, no relationship can survive without the next 6 words. And they're this: I am sorry, and, can you read it with me? I forgive you. No relationship is sustainable without these 6 words. I want to start with sorry, because when it comes to sorry, Jesus says something about apologizing. He's talking to his disciples about what happens when you come to church. In their day, they would come to church. You would offer a sacrifice as a way for God to forgive you of things. And so this is what he says. He says, if you enter a place of worship and about to make an offering, you suddenly remember a grudge that a friend has against you, to abandon your offering, leave immediately, go to this friend and make things right. Then and only then come back and work things out with God. You see, people would make sacrifices in the temple, knowing that they had done something wrong. But the idea is, okay, I did something wrong. Here is my dove or whatever it is. Here is my sacrifice. So God has made me right. You know, God and I, we're all good. And we believe this in some way. We might not say it out loud, but we believe it because we often do something wrong to somebody, and yet we know it, and it eats us up, and we confess to God. Hopefully, the guilt will be removed from us and that we will feel better about ourselves. But what Jesus is saying here is, listen, if you know that something isn't right and it's your fault, you need to stop what you're doing in an offering and go do what you can to make it right. Go do what you can to the person that you hurt. Go and apologize to them. Then you can be made right with God. I've always believed that unless you are right with others, you really cannot be right with God. Some more practical. Do's and don'ts. How about that? I love those little things when they're online. Do's and don'ts. First do of this is do figure out why you hurt somebody. This is all about saying, I'm sorry. You need to figure out why you hurt a person. There could be a lot of reasons. A lot of times I hurt people because I am just clueless and I am inept and I am ignorant to what I have done or not done or said. Sometimes it's ignorance, sometimes it's malice, sometimes it's because of selfishness or insecurity. It could be because of a substance abuse, whatever it is, figure out what you've done. And listen, don't let it be an excuse either. If you're an angry person by nature, don't say, listen, I'm sorry, but I'm just wired this way. This is just how I am. No. Don't use your shortcomings as an excuse. And then here's a don't. Don't tell the other person how to feel about your apology. Don't say this, I'm so sorry, but don't be sensitive. Don't be sorry. I'm so sorry, but you need to get over it. You need to forgive me. No, listen, do not tell people how to handle their own feelings. You can hope that an apology results in forgiveness, but that isn't up to you. And another don't, and I'm so guilty of this, especially as intellectual people, we're guilty of this. I'm so sorry you feel hurt because of what I did. Don't say that. Not good enough. Because what you're really doing is blaming them. That's what I've done. I blame somebody. Don't be sorry that your spouse feels hurt. Be sorry that you hurt your spouse or your kid or your parent. When you say, I'm sorry, that you feel hurt, then what you're really doing is saying, listen, if you were tougher, then this wouldn't bother you, right? Get over it, snowflake. Not good enough. By the way, research has shown that for people who apologize, when they do it, in the moment, the person actually feels weaker. But to the outside world, people who are observing them actually have an idea that that person is so much stronger. And the converse is true. For people who refuse to apologize, they feel like they are strong and they are standing on principles. And yet from the outside world looking in, they seem so weak and so petty. So listen, genuine apologies make you stronger. So let's practice it out loud with me. Come on, before you have to actually say it to somebody in person. 3 words. I am sorry. One more time. I am sorry. And if you're online, man, just type it. I'm sorry. So you need to apologize to this week. And none of those, by the way, none of those fake apologies. The kind where you actually own what you did and you let them feel how they feel. Who is it? Now, the next 3 words, again, that no relationship can do without is, I forgive you. We need to practice that. Because somebody today may feel a little convicted by what I'm saying, and they may look to you later and say, I am so sorry. And these might be the next words you say, I forgive you. Scripture tells us this, to be gentle and ready to forgive. Never hold grudges. Remember that the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. If you're a Jesus follower, you are supposed to pattern your life around the forgiveness that Jesus did for us. And we know that because he endured shame and torture and death to make sure that we were forgiven. And we are to, in turn, give that back to other people. It's not a suggestion. It is a commandment. It's not when you want to forgive somebody. It is flat out do it. I forgive you. And when I think about being able to forgive, I think about a couple things. I think about backpacks or a bag, and I think about rocks. Because inevitably what happens in life is somebody says something to you. And a few weeks ago, I talked about this a little bit, that there's this debtor relationship when somebody wrongs you or sins against you. Something happens and they owe you. But often, whenever you are sinned against, somebody does something or says something, it actually feels a little bit more like this. It is, she said that. I can't believe she said that. She doesn't even know what she's talking about. And it's actually something that we carry around, right? It's like a rock. He totally should have picked me, right? He totally should have picked me for that job. That other guy, he shouldn't have even been in the running. It was me. No. I can't believe they called me stupid. And so what happens is we walk around life constantly carrying a bag full of rocks, things that weigh us down. And I got to tell you, this is hard to breathe. And I've got like neck and shoulder problems. I got to tell you, this hurts. It's sort of choking me right now. Listen, are you listening? This is no way to live. And yet we do it. You see, the power of forgiving others is that not so much what it does for them, but what it does for us. The reason why we forgive, whether or not we think they are owed an apology, the reason why we forgive is because it sets us free. I heard a story about a guy who really struggled with this, and his dad had said some just vicious things growing up and in his early 20s, and so he didn't even speak to his dad for most of his life. And his son carried around this weight for years of the things. And then eventually his dad never apologized, but he died. And so this man continued to carry these things around, and it was crushing him. And so one day he actually decided he was going to do something different. And so he packed a picnic basket and he went to his father's grave, and he sat there in a lawn chair and he ate a sandwich and he took some wine and he toasted his dad, and he just told him the things that upset him. And then he said, "Dad, I forgive you." And the way he described it was like this. By the way, that makes me lightheaded in a good way. You see, that's what happens when you let go. Especially if you let go of an apology that you think you are owed. There's probably somebody that you think needs to apologize to you, and they're not here listening to this. Forgive them anyway. Because when you do, I tell you, you can breathe again. You can function again. You find yourself free, alive. Jesus said that when other people wrong you, don't get even. Pray for them. Bless them. Forgive them, and in that process, you find yourself free. So listen, if you've got one of these cards, I want you to grab it. Grab it with me. We're going to end with this. On the very front, I want you to, I know it's probably hard to see which is the front and which is the back, but the side that says Ephesians, that's the front. I want you to read this verse with me as we wrap up today. Let no evil talk come out of your mouths, but only what is useful for building up as there is need, so that your words may give grace to those who hear. Listen, I want you to live this out this week. I want you to live this out so the people who are closest to you know that somehow, some way, that you love them. And if somehow they understand that you love them, they just might get a glimpse that God loves them too. And then on the back, there's a psalm that I want you to get into this every single day, if you will. In fact, put this somewhere where you can see it, where you can remember it. It is a psalm, but it's a prayer. And I want us to end by praying this together. Say these words with me. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Let's pray.